A hearing continues today on whether there's enough evidence to try illegal immigrant Francisco Sanchez for murder in the death of Kate Steinle. She was gunned down in July in broad daylight while walking along a pier in San Francisco with her dad. Sanchez, who's been deported from the U.S. 5 times, admits he fired the shot but insists it was an accident. Let's bring in Ashley Merchant, criminal defense attorney, and Anna Young, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. Thank you both for joining us again.
Thank you.
So during the hearing, experts have testified that the bullet that killed Kate Steinle appears to have ricocheted off of the concrete walkway prior to hitting her. Sanchez has pleaded not guilty to murder. Is this ricochet theory, Anna, a key to that defense?
It certainly is. I think this ricochet theory can impart reasonable doubt in terms of whether Mr. Sanchez intended to kill Ms. Steinle, because the chief medical examiner testified that the bullet entered Ms. Steinle's back in an upward fashion. And let's keep in mind the shape of the bullet. It was not circular. It was in a rectangular shape with striations. So if you keep that in mind, that certainly hinders the prosecution's theory that he did in fact intend to kill her. Now that's not to say that Mr. Sanchez is completely in the clear, because if the prosecutor can prove that he acted in such a dangerous way and showed such a reckless disregard and a conscious disregard for human life by shooting into a crowded area such as the pier, then they very well can possibly secure a second-degree murder conviction in this case.
Yeah, the gun used in this killing had been reported stolen. Sanchez says he found it on a bench, and the defense lawyer, Matt Gonzalez, says that it just went off accidentally while Gonzalez was while Sanchez, that is, was mishandling it. So, Ashley, what do you make of that? Does that bolster the argument that this was an accident?
It definitely helps him. It definitely gives him a defense at this point, which is what he needs. And that's the whole point of the preliminary hearing. It's to get more information and to get the entire story and what law enforcement has done, so both sides can formulate either the defense or the prosecution. But there's a number of other charges, one that Anna mentioned, but there's a ton of other charges that he could be charged with. If he's a convicted felon, it's illegal for a convicted felon to have a gun. He's been deported before, so perhaps the fact that he had this gun at all in and of itself is a crime. So there's a lot of things that he can be charged with that can lead to a life or beyond sentence in this case. Felony murder is an option. So at this point, they're trying to gather all of the evidence and determine which charges are the most appropriate to go forward. And I'm sure they're going to try and get as many and as big of charges as they can possibly get in this case.
Yeah, and as Ashley's mentioning, this hearing is just to establish if there's enough evidence to take this case to trial. Assuming that that happens, Anna, do you anticipate possibly some of these charges being downgraded or others being added?
It potentially could happen, but here in California, the preliminary hearing is just a probable cause hearing. So the judge has the DA has a very low standard of proof. It's just probable cause. So I wouldn't be surprised if the judge issues what's called a holding order or gives the DA permission to go forward for purposes of trial. But if we're talking about actually securing a conviction, if this case were to go to trial, that's clearly a separate issue, because as you know, the standard of proof in terms of proving his guilt is guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, which is completely higher than what the judge is bound by in this preliminary hearing. So I'm interested to see what the judge is going to do with what charges are currently being filed, and of course, if the DA chooses to file additional charges, as Ashley mentioned.
Yeah, this case, of course, has political aspects. Sanchez is a Mexican national. He was deported from the United States 5 times before he shot Kate as she walked along that pier with her dad. Ashley, do you believe his immigration status will find its way into this case somehow?
I can tell you the defense is going to fight very hard to keep that out. And the question for the judge is going to be whether or not it's relevant. And at this point, it doesn't appear to be relevant to any of the issues that have been brought up. So I think that it will be kept out, but I think the state's going to try and get it in, but the defense will probably be successful in keeping it out because it's just not relevant.
Anna, what about during jury selection? A lot of people have heard about this case.
Yes, that's going to be very difficult for the defense. My understanding is that the defense at this point is not moving for a change of venue or trying to change the venue for purposes of the trial, but you'd have to live under a rock not to have heard about this matter. It's so heartbreaking, and everyone's heard about it. So I think in some way, shape, or form, the jury members are going to be faced with the idea of, if I were to sit on this panel, can I be fair and impartial? And that is something that's going to be very problematic, I think, for the defense.
Yeah, and it's brought the whole issue of sanctuary cities right into the forefront. All right, Ashley Merchant, Anna Young, thank you both again for joining us.
Thanks,
Fabian.